Right, here I've got a Retina IIc camera. Zoom out a bit. That's a bit better. Here I've got a Kodak Retina IIc camera that's just been sent to me for servicing. The complaint is that the shutter doesn't work, and I think I know why. If I crank the focus all the way forward, in this gap here you can see the rack, the curved rack that rotates in the shutter housing as you advance the film to cock the shutter. And as you might notice, it doesn't even twitch, which tells me there's no connection between the mechanism of the film advance and the shutter cocking action at the front here. Another symptom of this one is the rough feel to the film advance. Of course, you can't depress the shutter release because that's blocked from moving if the shutter's not actually cocked, but you can press the film release. I think this one's probably got a stripped cocking rack, so we'll open it up and find out. First thing I'll do is remove the rewind knob. I have two screws in the top cover underneath the rewind knob. And one on the end of the top cover at the other end. Lift that screw out of the way. Let's see what we can see. I'll zoom you back in. As you can see, only one tooth is partially engaged with the gear at this point. If I advance the film, as I turn the film advance lever, the gear is rotating, but it's just bouncing. The teeth of the gear are just bouncing along the damaged last tooth of the rack. So the rack is certainly the problem. It remains to be seen. I may be able to tell what caused that to fail. Quite often you can't. So there's our problem. The rack is also very damaged at this point. So I would say that most likely what's happened is that the rack has been pulled forward to cock the shutter. It has failed to move correctly, possibly because of some stiffness in the action of the shutter. The film advance has kept moving. The gears have deformed these teeth at this point to the extent where they have effectively jumped to tooth. And of course then as the film advance lever returns to the park position, it has pushed the rack all the way back to the end of its physical travel, leaving just one tooth partially in contact with the gear, which then quickly stripped off. I think that's what's happened. So the damage at this end on the rack is probably secondary. The cause is the damage at this point here. So this will all have to be stripped down, cleaned. I'll see if I can discover if there was any obvious reason for the rack to fail at that point. A fairly common problem is if the bush on the film advance shaft is worn, or if the whole bush assembly is held in place with two screws. If those screws are loose, it allows the whole shaft to move backwards and forwards enough to create too large a gap at this point. It's also possible that the screw, the shoulder screw that forms the support for the rack at this point, is loose or bent. If it wasn't tight, I wouldn't have said it was very loose. But that may be bent, and if that's bent, or if it's loose, it allows the rack to push away from the teeth on the gear, and so then the load's taken on the very tips of the teeth, and then they promptly fail. Right, into it. I'll be back when I've got something interesting to show you. Well, I've removed the components from the top of the camera. You may be able to see the state of the leatherette on the base of the camera here, and you can see that the pattern is pretty awful looking here. I don't know what's been done to that. Either it's been damaged with solvent, or the leatherette has completely broken up there and that's been patched back with some wax or paint or some sort of filler. Certainly I don't hold out much hope of getting this leatherette off in one piece and putting it back, but we'll certainly see what I can do. At this end, the tripod catch cover, I can see that whole tripod socket's moving there. This is stiff, it's unnaturally stiff, it's damaged in some fashion. Whether someone's had it off and got the spring back in the incorrect position, I don't know. Hopefully this will clean up. There's a lot of scratches on here. I don't know what they're from. They're a very unusual place to get scratches. We'll have to investigate that. One thing I did notice as I took the camera apart is this top cover. You'll see a circular shadow here. That's a dent. That's where the rewind knob has been hammered into the top cover, which means that the camera's been dropped on its head at some stage. If I look at the rewind knob, I can probably see the damage. It's quite chewed up. There's quite big dents just in here. And the name ring there is loose, so I may have to see if I can find another. It's loose. That name ring's loose, so I may be able to find a replacement for that, hopefully. And this is the strap lug from that end of the camera. And as you can probably see here, this section is curved. It should be a straight line through here. So that's bent, and again that's a sign that the camera's been dropped. Possibly the same incident that caused that. I've yet to find out. But my next task certainly is to remove this cover, the advance lever, and then see if I can get this leatherette off. These two screws holding this back catch cover in place are very damaged, and I think they're bent. The screwdriver just cams out of them fairly promptly. I'm just clearing the slot as much as I'm able there. Now I'll have another go. I think those screws are bent. I don't think they don't want to unscrew. They'll turn a part of a turn and then they stop. I may have to drill the tops off those ones. The screws have had it, they'll have to be replaced anyway. But I think they've become damaged. I think this whole tripod socket's loose and this whole base is twisted. The socket's been twisted. It almost looks to me like the socket here has been mushroomed out, bell-mouthed, so that effectively it's fixed to this this cover is now it's riveted over the edge of the cover, so it may be a very difficult job to get that off. Right, well, I've managed to pretty much drill the heads off those two screws, and I'll see if I can prise up the surround. Yep, that's popped. Try the other end. It looks like that's going to lift off. Just need some broader levers to get under there now. That's it. So this piece here that's supposed to turn on there, that's very tight. That aluminium piece, as I said, I suspected that had been stretched out of shape, and it has. These pieces are pretty much just locked together. The return spring, which I suspected was bad, appears to be fine. And I have my two stubs of screws here stuck into that tripod socket, which will probably come out quite well now the heads have been taken off them. So I'm stuck here with this bad cover and lever arrangement. So I'll check those closely, see if anything can be done with them. If there's nothing useful to be done, which is quite possible, I'll replace those two as well. I'm going to attempt to get this leatherette off now. It's loose at this end. I'm able to get my scalpel underneath it. What we have on the bottom of this camera is a chrome trim plate. Now that goes all around the edges, but there's a big block through the middle here which is exposed aluminium from the camera body. It's not uncommon for the leatherette to be stuck well to the aluminium body, but not to this chromed brass trim. So we'll see what we discover. The leatherette, as I said, is quite ugly. It looks like solvent damage to me. I don't know what's been done with that. Whether it was set down in a puddle of solvent, whether somebody was attempting to clean the film advance lever, which pretty much covers this good spot here, leaving this area exposed. Perhaps somebody was attempting to clean that with solvent. The lever's a bit of a mess. You can see all this brown staining here. Someone, I think, has attempted to glue a new rubber pad into it. I don't know what this brown staining is, whether that's related to that problem or not. You can see a lot of filth and bits of stuck rubber or glue on the back edge there. Anyway, I'll continue getting this leatherette off if I can. This area that's been damaged by solvent may well be weak. It may fracture. Quite commonly with leatherettes, you need to work in from all the edges to try and free up a difficult spot. I don't have a replacement leatherette for this one, of course. new leatherettes for 60-year-old cameras are a bit hard to find. Alright, well, it came off in one piece, so it'll go back on. It might not be any prettier when we're finished, but at least it won't be any uglier. Now I can carry on. Hopefully the rest of the job will be straightforward. I'll get this tripod socket off. The 3 screws were loose, just as I expected. And I have little doubt that they are loose because somebody went crazy doing the tripod screw up. The centre of this tripod socket is extremely chewed up. It's like somebody, and there's something stuck in there. Piece of rubber. Somebody has done up the tripod screw to such an extent that they have blown it right through the bottom of the tripod socket. In fact, what I'm looking at here is the end of a screw. So that's actually the end of a screw off the tripod I'm seeing in there. And it's been screwed through to such an extent it's gone right through to the film chamber. Or that might have been drilled out. Someone has broken off the tripod screw, attempted to drill it out, drilled right through the tripod socket, right through this shield which sits in the base of the camera, and that's why it's a mess. First time I've seen anyone do that. This is the second Retina IIc I've had here in as many days, where somebody has bent this lever here that operates the shutter. You can see it's been bent downwards. It's by no means as severe as the damage on the other one that I saw, but that didn't happen by accident. That can't happen by pressing on the button at the top of the camera. That can only happen by somebody getting into the front of the camera with a pair of pliers or a screwdriver and bending that arm down. I wonder what other exciting things we'll discover. Well, I took that tripod socket and I had a look at the remains of the screw that was stuck in the bottom of it, and I was able to peel it out of the slot, peel it out of the hole, because the centre had been drilled out and there wasn't much meat left. And it appears to be, it might be aluminium. It's certainly quite soft. In fact, it is aluminium. So somebody had the tripod had an aluminium screw. Well, aluminium's no good for screws, as you probably know. These 2 screws here that retained the cover, they are bent. The shafts are quite bent. That's why they wouldn't rotate when they were in place. But they weren't tight in the threads. They just came out with my fingers. So that's the answer to that one. Somebody had done up a screw from the tripod, and I can still see a thread of aluminium in there, and it had simply snapped off. If they'd been a bit braver and had removed the cover, removed the leatherette and taken the tripod socket off, they may well have been able to rescue the situation. Back shortly. Well, I was able to pull even more threads out of that tripod socket. Now it would actually function if you needed to use it, but it's so ugly from the previous person's attempt at drilling the screw out that I'm going to replace it anyway. But I've never seen anyone burrow a hole through one of these spaces before. That's a new one on me. I don't know if you'll be able to see the oil on these components. They're all very greasy. As a result, the shutter wouldn't function. The blades were glued together, and this probably had some effect on that cocking rack, though I can't be sure. Well, I'm in the closing stages of working on this Retina IIc now. A few hiccups along the way. You might remember that I said that the rewind knob was damaged and the top cover had been thumped in where the rewind knob had been pushed into it. Well, I replaced the rewind knob. That wasn't particularly difficult. But when I put the top cover on the camera, I noticed that the rewind shaft here is pushed right over. You can see that there's virtually no gap on this side and quite a considerable gap on this side. So it means that the bush for the rewind is bent and will need to be trued up or replaced. Also, I can tell because of the dent in the top cover on this side that I've got that bush reversed from where it was previously because it's canted the other way. When I went to screw the rewind knob on, I noticed it was going on very crooked. And it turns out that this screw is exceedingly bent. So it was going on in a very cack-handed, twisted fashion. So that nice chrome screw will also have to be replaced. So I'll get onto that next. I'll open up the top of the camera again, see if I can true up my rewind, replace that screw, and I'll show you what I've got. Alright, it's all done. Got the rewind knob on. I've had to replace the bush, replace the screw from the top. So, what have I replaced? We started with the rewind knob, that was damaged. The tripod socket. The film cassette bush from inside the camera that had been drilled through. The surround for the back release catch. The two screws that held the back release catch surround in place. The shutter cocking rack, that was ruined. This piece, part of the shutter release mechanism, that's all bent and loose. The rewind button, that broke when I went to reinstall it. The look of the metal there at the break looks like that was cracked previously. This wobbly screw that came from the rewind, and the rewind shaft bush. So that's a fairly big component count for a camera like this. But now we've got a good working Retina IIc. Everything's functioning smoothly, and I expect this one will give good service to its owner. So the odd things about this, one of the other odd things about this camera was the state of the leatherette here. And you can see a big patch through here where that leatherette, the pattern is melted out of it. And most likely that's solvent damage, I would think. Very unusual. Certainly not adhesive damage. Sometimes a poor choice of adhesive will cause the leatherettes to bubble up and turn nasty, but not in this case. So that's a bit of a mystery. Did I find anything else wrong with it? Well, when I went to fit to the front door, I noticed that it was quite stiff to open. You needed to apply quite a bit of force. So I thought perhaps the release button wasn't travelling far enough to release correctly. So I took that out and it was still exactly the same. And what it turned out is at the bottom here, that had been pushed in, drop damage I would say. And it was long-standing drop damage because you could see a bright spot here. That's where the paint is rubbed off it. It's rubbed right through the paint. And the corresponding part of the shroud here is also rubbed at that point and it's lost a lot of its finish. It's quite dull there instead of being shiny. So that's drop damage. This was certainly drop damage. The strap lug was slightly bent, that was drop damage. But the tripod socket, that business there with the broken screw, that was a completely different problem. And of course the shutter cocking rack was absolutely finished. The teeth on this are as bad as any you could ever see. There might be 3 teeth on that rack that still look good, the rest are just awful. So there we have it. Retina IIc, ready to go back to its owner. This one's got a long and cherished family history, I believe. I'm sure they'll be keen to see it come home. Thanks for watching.